It's February 2003. I'm minutes away from fulfilling a lifelong ambition. This Hercules aircraft is flying me and a team of winter warfare specialists deep into the wildest mountain plateau in Europe. Once we leave the plane, we'll have to survive in the harshest conditions a Norwegian winter can throw at us.
Our packs are our life support system. We've got everything in there that we're going to need to survive and live down on the Hardanger Plateau. Tents, sleeping bags, spare clothes, food, water, fuel, the works. It all comes to a total of about 20 kilos.
60 years ago, a team of highly motivated commandos made this same jump. The stakes could not have been higher. If the men had failed in their mission, Hitler would have had a crucial advantage in the race to build an atomic bomb, and the world might have been a very different place. We're going to re-examine a mission that was so secret it would be many years before the world knew exactly what the men had achieved. Theirs was an incredible story of survival, and they would become one of the most celebrated commando teams of the Second World War.
History would remember them as the heroes of Telemark.
Green light.
What an amazing sight! I'm on the Hardanger Plateau in southern Norway. The sun's been up for about an hour, and in a few hours' time, it'll be gone again. This has got to be one of the hardest environments on Earth to survive in, be you animal or man.
The Hardanger Plateau lies between jagged peaks and deep fjords. It forms the rugged heart of the Telemark region of southern Norway. 60 years ago, this innocent-looking factory on the edge of the plateau was the object of an extraordinary commando raid, which would have been impossible but for the ability of a dedicated group of saboteurs to survive in the mountains through one of the harshest winters on record. These men are the real heroes of Telemark. If the name is familiar, it's probably because of the movie made in 1965, but the film took huge liberties with the real story, glossing over what I think are the most remarkable aspects in favour of action and romance invented by the scriptwriters.
It was completely hopeless. It was not correct. We should have put a thumb down for it and said, this is nonsense.
It's pure Hollywood. All of it is nonsense. It's terrible. Maybe it's a good film, but nothing to do with the operation.
And for me, the film really missed the key point, which was the men's ability to survive in these mountains and endure the most horrendous conditions that actually made the operation possible. That's why I've always wanted to tell the true story. I want to tell how the four-man advanced party endured an epic 15-day march to the target, hauling 1/4 of a ton of kit through blizzards and deep snowdrifts. How they went for so long on such a meagre diet that they suffered malnutrition, and how they had to endure 4 winter months in the wild after the initial plan went down in flames. This was their target, the Norsk hydro factory near the town of Rjukan. In 1940, this was the only place in the world that was producing a substance known as heavy water, an innocuous-looking chemical with appalling potential in the wrong hands. The heavy water that was produced here looked and tasted exactly like ordinary water, but there was one key difference. It contained the component deuterium instead of hydrogen, making it 10% heavier. If you look at these ice cubes, if I take this one, which is made of ordinary water, it floats, while this one, watch, this is heavy water. It sinks like a stone to the bottom. Heavy water can be used to slow down the speed at which neutrons are set free in a nuclear reactor, basically the first step in the production of an atomic bomb. As the Germans invaded Norway in 1940, both they and the Allies were involved in a race to build the first atomic bomb. But the Nazis now had a crucial advantage. The plant, with its deadly output, was in their control.
It was the darkest day in my life when the Germans had taken over. My hope was to get over to Britain and get some training and back again.
The obvious solution was for the Allies to destroy the factory, but its location made it virtually impossible to attack. The surrounding mountains ruled out a low-level bombing raid, so the answer had to be a direct assault, with enough troops to storm the only access point, a narrow bridge over a 300-foot gorge. The British came up with a radical plan, the longest ever deployment of troops by glider, but they would need an advanced party to find a landing site, and this is where the heroes of Telemark come in. Since the Nazi invasion, Norwegians had been escaping across the North Sea, hoping for a role in the war. From the hundreds now living in Britain, 4, with the necessary survival skills, would be chosen for the job. Among the first to be recruited were Jens Anton Poulsen and Klaus Hellberg. Then living in London, both had grown up in the shadow of the Norsk hydro plant, and they were old friends, having gone to school together in Rjukan.
Since I was a small boy, my main interest had been outdoor life, hunting, fishing, take care of yourself in the mountains, and so on. When I was 15 years old, I had decided to become an officer, so this was very natural for me.
We all hoped to get back as soon as we could. So I was very glad when I heard that we were going to be sent to Norway.
The other 2 members of the team were Arne Kjellstrup, who died in 1995, and Knut Haugland.
We did know nothing. It was so strange. We had a meeting and we were told only that you're going on a very, very important mission.
The whole operation, codenamed Operation Grouse, was recreated for this 1948 film. What's amazing about this footage, shot just 5 years after the events it portrays, is that it stars 3 of the 4 original members of Grouse.
And so Trunstad wishes his men Godspeed. The leader, Lieutenant Jens Anton Poulsen, wireless operator Knut Haugland.
I was told the operation was very important. If the Germans got hold of the heavy water, they would be able to blow up some part of London. I didn't believe him. I think, you tell me this because you want us to do a good job. And I hadn't a clue of what heavy water was and how it was going to be used.
Alongside instruction in sabotage and undercover operations, the men had to be trained to parachute. None of them had ever jumped before, but because they were so short of time, they had to make do with just 3 practice drops before being parachuted into Norway in the winter, in the dead of night. 60 years on, this is where my journey and their footsteps really takes off. Like them, I'm learning to parachute from scratch. I have to convince the Norwegian army that they can safely drop me on the Hardanger Plateau in winter. First, 9 drops in 3 days with a civilian school in Britain. Then, a conversion course in Norway to prepare for a drop from a military Hercules.
Go!
1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. Check 3,000, 4,000.
Next, I've got a day to put in 4 jumps from a light aircraft. Once you leave the plane, all that training has to come back.
3,000, 4,000. Check. Canopy. Look out.
We had no difficulties with the jumping. So we were well prepared to go to Norway and jump down up in the mountains.
Training over, the scale of what we're about to do hits home. If you want to get men behind enemy lines without anyone knowing, the best way is still to drop them in from a plane. I'm flying in with a crack team of British and Norwegian soldiers to put history under the microscope. Below us, the Hardanger Plateau stretches for miles in every direction. It's barren and lifeless, but somehow we have to make it our home. The original members of Grouse are incredibly modest about what they achieved. They simply won't tell you how difficult it was to survive down there. So we're going to put what they did to the test by putting our own Grouse team on the ground and carrying out more or less the same operation. And these are the men for the job. To really appreciate the problems that faced the original members of Grouse, they'll be landing with 1/4 of a ton of equipment and figuring out how to shift it over 100 kilometers of snow and ice to the target. Their own backgrounds make them uniquely qualified for the task. First, mountain leaders Adam Rutherford and Jason Milne from the British Royal Marines.
As Royal Marines, we knew a fair amount of the story. Klaus visits Scotland every year to visit the mountain leader course and give an inspirational chat to the new up-and-coming mountain leaders. So for us, the chance to follow what the heroes of Telemark did is a unique opportunity.
And from the Norwegian Army, winter warfare specialists Thomas Adam and Preben Ukvitne.
From I was a young child, I did a lot of skiing. So also the last years have been interested in deer hunting and so on. So it fell naturally into this project because they did a lot of skiing and they did a lot of hunting, and so it suits me very nice.
30 seconds to slow down.
On October the 17th, 1942, the men boarded the flight that would take them back to Norway. The men were jumping at night and the full moon lit up the scene below them.
We were certainly nervous. But on the other hand, it was a nice feeling to see Mother Norway coming up against you. At last we were going to get down in Norway.
Every time we go parachuting, there's a certain amount of nerves, and if you ever lose that amount of nerves, then parachuting, you're maybe a bit too complacent to be doing it. As the door opens, you're looking out straight across the whole plateau, mountains as far as the eye can see. It's an awesome sight.
5 okay!
4 okay.
3 okay. 2 go!
Neck lock, over the clock.
Green light.
Check. Canopy. Lovely. What an amazing sight! This is the only way to see the Norwegian mountains. Absolutely amazing. Such a long journey and the last bit of it's so quick. It's an incredible adrenaline rush. And to see all the other guys out there, the chutes open ahead of you, brilliant sight. And then you look down and you see Norway, the mountains. It's so inspiring. You can only think that those saboteurs, it must have given their morale a huge lift to see their country that way, even if they were feeling like condemned men.
This is where the hard work starts. With 1/4 ton of kit scattered over the drop zone, our grouse team has to gather it all together before finding a campsite for the night. They're on Lake Songa, the closest safe drop zone to the mountain where the original team landed 60 years ago.
It took a day or two before I recognized the place where we were. And after 2 days we found all our equipment scattered around the mountainside. The last thing we found, I think, was our ski pack. And if we hadn't found our skis, it would have been a different story.
So we carry our stuff out to Bjørnhytten and make camp for tonight.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
The men had been deliberately dropped miles up on the plateau so that no one, least of all the Germans, would know they were there. They had a month to move 100 kilometres to the heavy water plant and find a safe landing zone nearby for the glider troops who would actually carry out the raid. The grouse team had grown up in this environment, so they were all expert skiers. In normal circumstances, they could have covered that distance in well under 2 days. When deciding how much food to take with them, they bargained on taking 5 days' worth. But conditions in October 1942 were so appalling that it would actually take them 15 days, a journey that would push them close to the brink of exhaustion. When our team sets off tomorrow to follow their route, they'll be carrying the same weight of kit and facing the same lack of calories.
Right, fellas, do you want to gather round? What I've got in this sack here are rations for you. And these are exactly the sort of rations that grouse actually took with them. In each bag is food for one person for 1 day. Okay?
Thank you.
Interesting to know what you think in comparison to what you're used to using. How you think you'll fare on that?
No one look at the cheese.
Cheese is a bit mouldy, isn't it?
It's kind of green.
The original grouse team decided to keep their pack weights down by leaving half their food supplies at the drop zone. They thought they'd be able to return for the rest later, but as days turned to weeks, they had to ration themselves to just 2,500 calories a day.
That's butter.
That's what we've given our team, even though they would normally need about 3 times as much.
Because we've got less of a calorific intake, and we normally we're looking at 6,000–7,000 calories to do the work that we expect to do. I think our physical condition is going to degrade rapidly. We're not going to be capable of covering the distances we'd normally cover.
Well, it's the end of an absolutely perfect day. It couldn't have been better. We've been so lucky with the weather. Dropping in on this glorious day, amazing conditions, no wind, no snow, just sunshine. And it's a bit spooky being up here on top of the Hardanger Plateau, knowing that we arrived by parachute. It means that people outside of the plateau just don't know that we're here. And that was something that was really special for grouse. When they arrived on the Vidda here, they felt that they had occupied a part of Norway again for the Norwegian people. Must have been a very special feeling.
To make the most of the limited daylight hours, the team are up well before dawn, so they can set off as soon as the sun comes up.
I think it's approximately minus 15 to 18 degrees below zero outside, but was just wearing my underwear and a sleeping bag, and very nice and warm.
But how would the original members of grouse have coped with temperatures as low as that? To make the comparison, Jason volunteered to sleep in an old World War II tent and sleeping bag.
It wasn't too bad.
you'll notice it's quite big at the top, so I'd imagine it's designed to wear a lot of kit inside it during the night, as I am now. It's very, very big, so you've got a lot of surface area to try and warm up, but yeah, they would have worn most of their kit inside it, I think.
When I was a schoolboy, we do this every weekend. Sitting and waiting for the sun rising if it's good weather. But this is quite normal.
Another perfect day dawns, but 60 years ago, conditions here were so bad that the men abandoned everything except the kit that was vital to the mission. A radio, 2 accumulators, a hand generator, a beacon to guide in the gliders, plus tents, sleeping bags and cooking kit, food and weapons. A total of 250 kilos. They broke it down into 8 loads of about 30 kilos and set up a shuttle system to start moving towards the target.
We had so much to carry, and we did every trip 3 times. We went with 1 load to a certain distance and then put it there, and then back to the containers, a new load, and thus we made every distance 3 times then.
So to cover 100 kilometers from their drop zone to the target, they could expect to actually travel 3 times as far. Picking up the route where it passes their camp, our team is going to see how tough that was. Today they'll move half their kit to a new camp 10 kilometers away and then return for the rest, a journey of 30 kilometers in all. They'll repeat the process for 3 days. Seeing how the hard work and limited rations affects them should give us a pretty good idea of how the original team fared over the 15 days it took them to reach the target. Without giving too much away, the results are going to be pretty surprising. To add to their discomfort, they'll be sleeping in tents at night, while the crew and I will be basing ourselves at mountain huts like this one, travelling out each day to see how they cope with the combination of vigorous exercise and limited diet. For us, cloudless blue skies and fabulous snow conditions make travelling on the Hardanger Plateau a pleasure. But 60 years ago, the men faced unimaginable hardships, later described by the grouse leader Jens Anton Poulsen in his official report. The snow was heavy and deep, he says. The men who went out of the ski tracks sank up to their knees. There was surface water on the ice, and we had our feet soaked the whole time.
This is what he was talking about. If you look under the snow on most lakes, you'll actually find water. And the reason that is there is as the pressure of the snow falling on top of the ice pushes down, it forces water up through little cracks that exist around the edges, and it seeps out across the lake where it's insulated from freezing by the blanket of snow. Now, it must have been a lot worse than this back in 1942, because in Poulsen's report he says that each day's march was sorrowfully slow.
Meanwhile, the shuttle continues. Thomas is at tonight's campsite, putting up the tent so that it will be ready as soon as everyone finishes. Preben is still on the first leg, having loaded his pack heavier than anyone else's. And Jason and Adam have dumped their first load and are on their way back for the second.
How's it going, fellas?
Yeah, not too bad, really. We've already done the first leg. We're heading back up now to get some of the heavier equipment, and obviously Preben's on his way to the tent. So hopefully we'll back there, pick up heavy equipment, back again, and we're planning for that to be the majority, or if not all the kit, so about 30 kilometres.
We obviously want to cut out the factor of having to make another return journey and adding another 20 kilometres onto the whole affair.
Back in 1942, training of the British glider assault teams carried on, preparing to attack on the next full moon. The people masterminding the operation had no idea of the difficulties being faced by Poulsen and his men. With no working radio antenna, they couldn't get messages out, so only they knew how close they were to exhaustion. On our journey, Adam and Jason have made it back to the first camp, but their packs are about to get a bit more cumbersome.
And let's make a light as well.
Jason's got to carry the World War II tent and sleeping bag he slept in last night.
Half man, half house.
And Adam's loading up the battered old suitcase that 60 years ago would have contained all the radio equipment. Today, it's filled with the same weight in sand. The two men are now carrying about 35 kilos each. Balance and rhythm are critical. With that load on, they've got to cover the remaining 10 kilometres. Shuttling gear like this could have become soul-destroying, especially in the conditions grouse faced 60 years ago. But the original team had been hand-picked for this job. All had been desperate to get back to Norway and take part in the war, and this was their chance to prove themselves.
The most important thing, what I had up here, their mental attitude, their willingness to see it through. And I knew I wouldn't have that problem with my comrades.
Adam and Jason complete their day. They've been working for 8 hours and they've just finished their second trip back with loaded packs.
It's much better to be here than out there carrying this. Obviously, still out of breath, so it's hard work, but no, quite happy to be back. And that's day one out the way, so yeah, we definitely require a large amount of fluid now, to replace a good 3 odd 4 litres each, just to sort ourselves out. Otherwise, won't be good for anything by tomorrow.
I'm glad to be here.
Yep, there you are. Pause.
It's great.
It's hot.
Thank you.
Felt like Good?
Yeah.
Tonight the guys are going to be camping out again. Their tents will provide some protection, but for morale, there's nothing like a good fire. There's a real knack to making one in this sort of environment, as everyone working in the north should know.
Problem we have is the depth of snow. You can see that there's 1.5 meters of snow here. If we build a fire on top of this, even if we build a platform under it, it will sink into the snow. What happens is it will make a funnel shape hole in the snow, and the fire will be down there with all the warmth, and we're still up in the cold. So it's very important that we dig down to the ground and create a space where we can sit. Now, that'll get me out of the cold, out of the wind, and the warmth of the fire will bounce at me, so the fire will be much more efficient.
There's my seat, nice warm seat. So now the fire's lit, what we'll do is we'll turn that into a special type of fire called a newing fire, which is an emergency fire used all across Scandinavia with parallel logs to kick out heat with very little tending. Our grouse team have all spent months on military exercises in this sort of environment, so as they get ready for another night in sub-zero temperatures, they really know the value of a simple fire.
Okay, in the bag today then, we have pemmican. What we do is heat up the pemmican in the pan, half the butter in there, slice of cheese up, put that in there, probably about half I think, and we're going to add half the sugar, so it gives a bit more energy and give it a slightly sweeter flavour. How's she looking, Ads?
Oh, bubbling away nicely. I think it's now time to add the biscuits to the concoction, just to thicken it up a bit. It's about time I eat some of that food, I think.
I think so. Keep filming.
No. As you can see, myself and Jason, job's a good one, all gone. That was completely full, and I think it did the trick because we're both quite toppers now, and looking forward to a quick cup of tea before we insert ourselves into our bags for the next 12 hours. 12 hours. Happy with that.
The plan for our grouse team today is to shuttle everything to a hut 20 kilometers away. They're leaving Lake Songa, where they landed, and they're crossing into a valley that will lead them to the target. This is a punishing climb, but it's one they'll have to do twice as they return for the rest of their kit. But as the original team reached here, they had an amazing stroke of luck.
Rather curious story. As a boy at the Rjukan, I had a small sledge, and during the war it disappeared. And of all places, I found my own sledge in a hut in the Songa Valley.
Probably the sledge had been stolen from him before the war, and now he found the sledge, and that helped us much.
Then we could put the accumulator on the sledge and all the heavy equipment, and also most of what was in the rucksacks. So we didn't have so much to carry on our back.
We've just seen that little fella over there, which will hopefully make the rest of the day quite easy. Well, easier anyway. Yep.
This simple discovery probably saved the original mission from disaster. As the team head back for the rest of their kit, they know from now on they'll be able to carry everything in one go, effectively cutting the distance they have to cover by 2/3.
When you know every kilometre you've skied is one more in the bag and it's out the way, it definitely boosts your morale and gives you something to aim for. You haven't got that sort of constant feeling of, oh, I've done this and now I've got to go back again. You can concentrate on the job and the mission at hand.
We catch up with them again 6 hours later. And like the original grouse team before them, they can now look forward to their first night in a hut.
That's great.
Hi guys. Blimey, this is luxury, isn't it? I don't know. Well, how's it going?
Yeah, not bad. Yeah, glad to end up in a hut anyway. The past couple of days have been particularly cold, probably around about -20 at night. So imagine in the hut we're going to be at least in the plus.
And you save a lot of energy because you don't have to use a lot of energy getting yourself warm outdoor, and you can dry your clothes a bit at least, so it means a lot to be inside a hut.
Well, as you can see, hut nighttime administration. In the kitchen you have Thomas. He's making drinks for everyone in his very nice underwear, and if I spin around past Jason, you can see hanging up are all the sleeping bags, drying out prior to us getting in there tonight and having a good night's sleep.
Today, our team will be travelling through this valley and crossing the frozen lake Bitdal. Crossing frozen lakes can save you plenty of time and energy, but it can also be extremely dangerous. On one occasion, Jens Anton Poulsen fell through the ice and had to be rescued by his colleagues. This is something that all soldiers working in this sort of environment train for regularly, so that they don't panic if it does happen.
If they are going to be travelling across ice, there are a few preparations they make. Firstly, they make sure that their ski binding is loose so they're not trapped in it should they break through ice. And secondly, their hands are free of the loops on their ski poles.
A layer of ice is already forming on the hole we've dug out. The water itself is just above freezing and the air temperature is -18 with a cutting wind. Preben's volunteered to show how to deal with such an emergency. He's on safety ropes and there's a heated tent ready, but if you were out here on your own, you would have seconds to act correctly before you started to freeze to death.
Okay, Preben, over to you. You'll see, he'll use his ski poles to get out. And he's coming back to the side that he broke through on, because here he knows that the ice will support his weight. If he was to keep going forwards, the ice could be getting thinner. See how he uses the poles so he can get out unassisted. Excellent.
On the thermal camera, you can see that before Preben went into the water, his heat loss was restricted to his uncovered face. But once he's got out, you can clearly see the difference. Because he's wet, he's now losing heat 25 times faster than the rest of us. So he's lit up like a Christmas tree. He's already on the slippery slope that could end in death from hypothermia.
Rather cold. Don't try this at home.
Without a heated tent, Preben would have to strip down and put on dry clothes as fast as possible. That's why when you travel here, you should always carry a ditch kit, an emergency pack full of spare clothing, a tent and a sleeping bag, the bare minimum to make an incident like this survivable. Without that, Poulsen might not have survived going through the ice, especially as he and his men had few energy reserves. Once we've thawed Preben out, our team moves on across Lake Bitdal. Their final destination is the hut that the original team made their base while they waited for the glider party to arrive. The steep sides of the valley funnel wind across the lake at terrific speeds, and there's little direct sunlight to warm the body. A long uphill climb at the point that they leave the lake makes this one of the toughest challenges to date. Although they've only been going for 3 days, the lack of food is starting to tell.
You work a lot slower, and you have to try to be conscious about that, because if you try to work fast on too little rations, it empties you within hours, actually. Yeah.
So by the second week of their trek, the original grouse team were really struggling. They were often only managing 2 or 3 kilometers a day, but they had to press on to make their rendezvous on the next full moon.
Finally though, after 18 days, the team arrived at this hut within striking distance of their target. It had taken forever. For the first 3 days they'd been pinned down by the most appalling weather, and the journey, which should have taken a week, actually took 15 days, all achieved with hardly any food.
This hut was well chosen. It was close to the lake where the gliders would land, but far enough from the factory to avoid raising suspicion. Because of problems with their antenna, they'd failed to make radio contact with London since landing. They desperately needed to announce that the mission was still on.
Inside, they found several bamboo fishing poles, which they lashed together to make a makeshift aerial mast.
I got hold of 3 or 4 of them, I think, put them together and got a high antenna, and then I got connection right away, first class.
At Bletchley Park, SOE's radio monitoring base, the operators were so skillful that they could tell the touch on the Morse key of individual operators. Sometimes they could even tell whether or not they were under stress. So you can only imagine how they must have felt when they heard that first faint signal coming in on grouse's frequencies here from the Norwegian mountains.
Our grouse team has been on the move for 3 days, and in that time they've covered about a third of the distance the original team managed. But the effort is written in Jason's face.
Today was by far the most difficult day. It's only today that we've realised exactly how much weight they did have. Now we've got all the kit in one go, but it's very, very heavy, and very hard going.
Do you think you could have done 18 days on those rations?
I've done 3.
Yeah. I wouldn't be weighing 15 stone by the end of it. I'm more like about 10, I think. But they obviously did it, and they had the motivation and the drive behind them to get it cracked. But it's an amazing effort.
We weighed the guys before they started their trek, and I must say I hadn't expected much change after so few days. It's fair to say everyone was stunned by the result.
So you lost quite a lot of weight, haven't you?
Yeah,
on average about 4 kilos each, which Preben was 5 kilos.
5 kilos?
3 days. I mean, we were probably going too fast for our own sort of good. Maybe if we just slowed down a little bit, it might have helped us a bit.
Excellent. Well, I think what we're doing here, I mean, you're just showing what these guys went through, because, you know, they're incredibly modest. They'd never say that what they did was tough or difficult. It was just a job. But the truth is, it was pretty special, wasn't it?
Each day it sort of dawned on us every day that, you know, like this is quite special, and then today, particularly, a particularly hard day. And it's now that you start to realise, you know, how much of an epic they did have.
I think for them, getting here was like phase 1 is closed, and the job was starting actually when they got here, because then they could start the recce on the landing zone for the gliders, and then they could start getting sorted out the Germans down on Wehrmacht. So obviously very happy to get here, but now they could start to work.
We had to start on getting as much intelligence as possible about the guard around the factory, about the minefields there, etc., etc. We got to know, I think, everything of importance for the demolition party.
By now, the original grouse team had been living on minimal rations for nearly 3 weeks. At last, they were lucky enough to find some lost sheep, and they went straight into the pot. 60 years on, our team can also look forward to their first decent meal since landing in Norway.
There you go.
We were so hungry, and we felt the smell of the good meat. So it meant so much to us. We found some peas in the hut and various things there, which we put up everything to make a nice supper.
It's our first sort of proper meal, get away from the pemmican and the mouldy cheese and get into some fresh meat. I think it's fair to say we're all starving by now.
Dinner is served, James.
Oh, looks great. Yes.
Yep.
It's good.
Look at that.
Yeah.
You could serve that in the ivy. It's on a bed of brown biscuits.
You know, guys, we're much more lucky than the original grouse was. They had made their lamb stew. They dropped the pot on the floor.
No one said a word. We kneeled down with the spoon. The floor was not very clean because I had reindeer skins. There were lots of hair over it. But we picked out the reindeer hairs. We ate it. It was good. Very good.
In the spirit of grouse, they used what they could find.
Yeah.
So do we.
On the 17th of November 1942, 3 days ahead of the full moon, the radio operator Knut Haugland was able to send an encouraging message to London about conditions for the gliders.
Lake coated with ice and partly covered with snow. Last 3 nights light and the sky absolutely clear. Temperature about -5 Celsius. Strong wind from the north has quieted down. Tonight, beautiful weather.
Well, we got a crack signal that they are coming tonight. I think it was girl. So we went down to the landing zone, placed out our lights in the snow, and waited.
Suddenly, I heard a characteristic note in my headphones, so I cried out to Jens.
One of the aircraft with the glider. We arrived over the area.
We heard the motors, and the airplane was heading straight on us. But they were in clothes and went over us, turned, and then disappeared. We didn't see a thing.
In worsening weather, the aircraft strayed further and further from Grouse's position. Then suddenly, disaster struck. The tow ropes attached to the gliders started to ice up, and the pilots in the towing planes struggled to keep control. Three of the 4 aircraft had crashed. Everyone on board was either killed on impact or would be dead within days.
During the next day, we heard from the headquarters, and we understood that there had been a disaster.
Those who survived the crashes were shown no mercy. Hitler had decreed that all captured commandos would be put to death, so all were taken from their hospital beds and prison cells and executed in cold blood, a chilling warning for anyone who would follow them in trying to destroy the Nazis' atomic bomb project. As for the men of Operation Grouse, they had endured 18 days of punishing conditions to reach this hut, and then, cold and hungry, had waited a further 2 weeks for the gliders to come. Now the mission they had trained for had failed, and there was no backup plan in place. But as Hitler raced towards building the first atom bomb, the future of the whole world was at stake, so they couldn't be allowed to abandon their mission.
I then got the message that we would go up in the mountains and stay there and wait. Well, that's easy to sit in London and say go up in the mountains. So we didn't know where to go.
But they had to get further away from the factory. The Germans had found maps in the crashed gliders, identifying the heavy water plant as their target.
The net was closing in. In a climate of fear surrounding the failure of Operation Freshman, the 4 members of Grouse had to disappear back into the Hardanger Plateau to live on their wits and await their next set of instructions.
Next, it's back to the basics of survival. A diet of reindeer moss as Grouse faces month after winter month, waiting for reinforcements with next to no food.
Yeah, that's disgusting.
It's amazing when you are really hungry. You can eat anything.
And the mission's back on. Fresh troops finally arrive to lead the assault and strike a blow for Norway and the civilized world.
I think of Britain and America. You were never occupied. We knew what occupation was, and we fought against it, and we fought against it willingly.
Join us next week as the story of the real heroes of Telemark continues. But stay with us now for an American family in India on Worlds Apart.